Hey everyone, I'm Tim Hay. I'm on the growth team, product manager. Um, Wanted to share a couple of ideas that I'm working through in preparation for a meeting that's coming up later this week to review a handful of ideas um, and really build out a nice big backlog for the growth groups to kind of get to work over the next quarter. Recently, here, let me share my screen. Recently, we've been really working on redefining our KPIs. So in Q4, the growth section focus is going to be to increase SaaS, new group namespaces, free to paid conversion rate, basically going over 4 key actions. Um, each PM has their own kind of focus area. I'm going to be focusing on inviting team members. And in the async issue that we're working through, um, Jackie did a really good job of creating a mural and getting us organized here. So that way we can kind of contribute, think about some ideas, and then talk through them as a group. Here's my list. I came up with, it's like 8 right out of the gate. Uh, these are supposed to be quick, iterative ideas for us to really dig into. And just ideate on and see if they make sense, and if they do, great, and if not, like, let's just throw them away. So the first one I have is to send merchandise to users who invite more than 5 users to an eligible group. We've seen this done by a couple of different companies. One that I really think is cool is a company called Ask Kodiak. They actually force you to use an API. And part of the onboarding process when you're using that API is to actually send yourself a t-shirt through the API. I thought it was really cool. And it aligns really nicely with our focus area of inviting team members. The second one is to use credits to incentivize members to eligible groups. I think this is a really interesting one too. We see a lot of companies do this, not only B2C, but B2B, where they'll actually give you credits in the form of something that you would typically pay for to expand on more of the product. In this case, it would be adding users. So how do we do this? Can we give them credits for CI minutes? Can we give them credits for storage, or even discounts on licensed seats if they add more people when they do decide to go to a paid plan? Third one here is to send an email campaign to single member group owners and really just nudge them to invite additional members. I think this one's really straightforward. We've done a little bit of thinking here around what this could look like and how we would go about it, but it is super straightforward. What we want to do is just identify a huge list of single member group owners, hit them with an email. Maybe not hit them. Maybe we'll send them a nice email that says, hey, invite additional members to your group because GitLab's better with people. The fourth is a little bit more complicated, but what we want to do is we want to auto detect existing GitLab users with the same domain when they're inviting members to a group and encourage them to invite them. What I mean by this is when you're going through an onboarding process, and I don't know, there's a couple of examples here. Airtable does it really well. Clockwise does it really well. But when you're actually setting up your workspace, what they're going to do is they're going to populate a form that allows you to add multiple users right then and there. So that way, when you start out, you're not alone. I think it does a good job of kind of showing that, hey, you can add members to a group right away, like right out of the gate. I think this one would go really nicely with the existing workflow for our onboarding experience, where we're asking them to basically create a group right out of the gate. If we were able to create a second place for them to actually add members to that group, it might work really, really well. The fifth option, or the fifth idea here, is to add an option to import users to a group via CSV. I think this is just kind of like some low hanging fruit. I don't necessarily see this as being like a big splash, but I know that as an if I were an admin at an organization and I didn't have an easy way to upload or import a list of all of my existing users or the people who I wanted on it, and I had to do it individually with an email address, I would, I don't know, I would just expect more. So I feel like this is probably like just a real, like a simple improvement that we could potentially take on. Um, Number 6 here is to notify existing users a member just joined GitLab when their email domains match. Uh, I think this one's kind of cool. Haven't done a ton of thinking. It just came to me just the other day, so I jotted it down really quickly and created an empty issue for it. But really, the thinking around this one is you see this when you visit, like, I don't know, B2C websites that are basically saying like, oh, a user bought something, right? And then they flash like a little modal to you. I think that's where I was inspired by this, right? And they're like, hey, somebody just bought X, Y, and Z, like, or Airbnb does this, like 47 people booked this place, somebody just booked that thing. I think it would be kind of neat to, maybe it's not daily, maybe it's not instant, maybe it's weekly, that we send an email or we notify existing users when people from their company with the same domain, right? We could tie it back to the domain and say, hey, here's a list of all of the people that joined with the same domain. Maybe they would work well together with you in your group. Just an idea. Uh, the 7th item here is call attention to the member section for groups with less than 2 users in it. This one, in my mind, is pretty straightforward. But then again, not everything in my mind is straightforward, so I figured I'd talk you all through it. When you go to a group and there isn't a second member in it, like what's the point of having a group? So I feel like it should be really, really important for us to kind of call it out in the left side navigation. Right here, you can kind of see in this group, I created a group called High Surf. There are no members in it, except I think I added myself. And wouldn't it be cool if we could just either use a pulse or a highlight or a light box or something to just call attention to that members, and maybe even have a little message underneath the members, right? Like the word members in that UI component that says, this group only has one member, or add more members here. I feel like it would just hopefully call attention to it and drive more people to it. The last one I had, this one's pretty light, but I feel like it could be important for us to just collect a bunch of information and figure out where people actually want to invite members through the UI, regardless of onboarding. I feel like this one we could do this in a number of different places inside the UI and just figure out what the best places are. Really, if we can just test a link button placement in some various places in the UI of GitLab to add members. There's a bunch of different places. 2 areas right off the bat that I think is the group page. And then I also think that it might be interesting to try an experiment inside the user setting, although it's kind of out of place because they are like user settings. It's not necessarily like settings for a group. But it might be interesting to see how many actually engage with it and click on it and then drive them to the actual member setting of a group. A lot of complexity, I think, in that one, but the first one in the group page, I feel like is a pretty easy one. So anyway, those are my ideas. Love to talk through them. I'll put a bunch of links in the notes below. Thanks.